Okay, good afternoon, IB Biology. This is Mr. McGee, and today we're going to do the first of many tutorials over the next 2 years on how to create a graph and a table from the data that we collected. So again, it is expected that you have a copy of Microsoft Excel. I am using Excel 2016 or 18 here, I believe. Any of those recent versions after version 2013 should be sufficient. If you have a version prior to 2013, it's got a little bit of different keys on it, but it still should be understandable. Now, if you're using a Mac computer with Microsoft Excel on it, you can use that, but it is going to have a little bit of a learning curve. For example, some of the tabs, instead of being up here or buttons off to the side when you try to create a graph, they might be kind of switched around and in different places, but the same features are available on a Mac that they are on a PC. So my tutorials are only for those people using Windows 10 and Microsoft Excel 2016 or later, but you can definitely make this work as long as you have Excel. Google Sheets simply will not work with what we're trying to do here. It does not do error bars and it does not compute anything. So first thing we're going to do, if we look at our data table right there, we've got the whole potato adjusted volume. This is all the group data that I received over class for the last lab we did on surface area to volume ratio. And notice I didn't put anything else in here. I just put a title just so you knew what it was. And then down here we have our diced potato, and this is the adjusted volume again for this. A few of these are blank because several of you said it went too higher, but several of you did note that you used a ruler and you tried to estimate where the numbers went further above the graduated cylinder, which is not very accurate, but it should work for this. And this is time, of course, here. So really quick, before we get into too much else, let's identify the parts of the table, and then we can begin setting up our graph. So these are what we would call our trials, and these are all what we're measuring, so this is the dependent variable. Our independent variable, or what will be our x-axis on our graph, is time. And so we want to have that labeled time, and the unit has to be after it, so this is going to be in parentheses seconds, just like that. Our independent variable is, again, this, and that means our entire section here is what we're measuring as an outcome. This is our dependent variable, and this is adjusted volume. We have our unit, and that is measured in milliliters. So the only thing we need to do next is pretty much essential on any time we do a table. We need to calculate a mean, and we need to calculate something else too. In middle school, you may have calculated the range, but that's not going to work in this case. We need to calculate the standard deviation. A lot of times, we'll just put SD in there. To calculate this, it's pretty simple. There's several ways to do this. You can click on any box, and then you come up here to functions, f of x. By clipping this f of x function, it will click a formula and it'll calculate it in that box you had selected there. Now, my most recently used, you can see that, but if you go to all, you should be able to find one here that says average, right there. Average, that's not it. You see if I can, average, I didn't even see it. Click on average, and that's basically the mean. And you notice it says number 1 and 2. You do not need number 2. We're just going to do number 1. And something essential about Excel, please make sure you see this because Excel is very tricky. With that being highlighted there, it's going to erase it when I click my raw data and drag it over like this. And when I let go, it'll calculate that. What you don't want to do is click or have it clicked off and then try to highlight it, because a lot of times it'll add up, well, you'd have to see it later, it adds something behind it. I always, just as a safeguard, I make sure that is highlighted, or I just erase it before I put my raw data in there like this. Or you can click on this little icon right there, and that'll insert it in there too. Actually, you see what it did there? It added 2 of these together because I didn't delete them ahead of time. All right, let's try that again. So, I calculated the mean. In this case, it's going to obviously be 0. Down here, I can do that again. Click here for mean, click up here for function, and go down to average, although it's going to be probably under your most recently used. Clicked on average. Whoops. And now to calculate that, make sure that's erased. Go over here to this icon and highlight our raw data. Make sure you do not highlight the time because that's not part of your data. Click like there and it will insert. So you can continue on doing that, but there's a couple other ways to do this. Another way you can do this, especially after you calculated one box, is you can click on the cell you want and hit Control and C on your keyboard for a Windows user. Highlight where you want that equation to be pasted at, and then you just hit Control V and it will paste the equation. So if you think about it, you're really copying this equation, and that equation will post down here and apply to every single one of these. In fact, I can do it down to this one too for the diced potato, and it'll post the equation. Look how easy that is. So that's one thing nice about Excel is you can go and do that, but there's another way I'm going to show you too. Up here where it says Auto Sum, it only works for a few of these features, just basic algebra, and we can do it on Sum to make your life a lot easier. Click on all your raw data and drag it one box over. Go up here to Auto Sum, click on the little arrow and go to Average. And there is a shortcut for a very commonly used feature. You can't use it on a lot of things, but you can use it on averages and sums and things like that. And same thing, we can do this, highlight it over like that, and do it just like that. When it comes to standard deviation, that's a little different because standard deviation, we do not have a simple formula. We have to calculate this. So again, click on the box here where you want it calculated. Go over to f of x, and then go under here for all, or you can go under statistics, but I'll just go under all. And then we want to scroll all the way down to stdev for standard deviation. And there it is. You'll see a bunch of these stdevs.p's. I honestly don't know what these are. You click on the one that just says stdev for standard deviation. And again, make sure that's erased or highlighted. Click on the little box to the side, and that should erase out of there. You're going to tell the computer you want 0 through here. And again, you're making sure that you're not highlighting the time or the mean, because that's not your data. That's one of the biggest things people do that get this wrong. Click back there, and you have standard deviation of 0. Now again, I can do that for this next box. I can click on here and go to stdev, and I can just do this one at a time and tell it what I want to calculate. Or you can take the shortcut, and once you calculate one of them, hit Control C on your keyboard, and then hit Control V after highlighting. Do the same thing here, Control V. It will paste the equation. And it looks nice and neat just like that. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to kind of clean this up a little bit here. Now, my computer, because I just used this earlier, the decimal places are made, but your computer might look kind of something like this. We don't want decimal points all over the place. We want consistency in our decimal points. If you notice, our raw data is rounded to the whole number except for this one. This one here, we're going to go ahead and round it to 1 decimal place less. It's more consistent. The rule of thumb, and we're going to talk about this later, is if your raw data is all rounded to a whole number, you're going to want your mean and standard deviation to be 1 decimal place more. And in that case, we want these to be rounded to 1 decimal point. Go up here under number, and there's this little icon, and you just find it, and you can move this in any direction, but let's round it to 1 whole number and do the same here. It should have already, on your computer it might be all over the place, but that is how you round this, okay? Now that we have that set, we've got we have everything we need to make the graph. We just need to tidy up a few things here. So in order to make this look a little more tidy, let's do this. I like to click and highlight everything, and I like to make one nice box around it by going up here to the little box icon, and you can make a border around anything you want to. You can even get rid of all the borders, or as I like it, click on all borders, and I do the same down here. This makes my table stand out really nice, especially when I put it on paper. But now it's kind of hard to see what we're looking at, so let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. Click on the whole potato here. I want that whole potato volume up there to be up here a little, or to be across all these trials, so I am going to do this. I'm going to go, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add a row above this. Right click, insert, entire row. What we want to do now is signify that these are trials and that this whole thing up here belongs to the potato. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy and paste, paste this at the top. I seem to be missing my function to do that here. I'm going to paste that potato volume at the top, and once again I want to give that some space, so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight it kind of like this and give it a little box. And let's do that for the diced potato while I'm at it. And I'm going to click up here, and I want a box that goes all the way across there just like this. And it'll look nicer. You'll see why in a minute. Now what I want to do is I want to label down here trials. So we'll put T1, maybe T2, T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, T8, T9, and it looks like we're going to have a T11 here, which is a really good number of trials. Let's go here to, again, T1, or if you want, you can just highlight this entire top thing here, and you can just paste it all the way across. Same thing, we're going to need a title here for mean and standard deviation, and we're also going to need time in seconds down here as well. So what we want to do now is put this title for whole potato all across this, because if you think about it, whole potato volume is representing all of these below, as this is all the dependent variable, and time by itself over here is the independent variable. To get whole potato across here, what we're going to do is highlight all this and then go over here to merge and center. That's how that works. Do the same thing over here, merge and center, and that looks a lot nicer. But let's make it look even more nice. We're going to click and highlight all of this, and let's go up here and add a little background color. I'm going to add a little shade right there, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with time. I think this makes it look really nice. And you can use color if you want to. The only thing is when you print your lab reports, if you do that in the future, the color does not stand out well. But on this assignment or any other computer simulation or whatever we do, you are free to add any color you want up there, as long as it's not some crazy color that makes it hard to read and, you know, whatnot. I don't mind with that. So looking at it, we're just about done. There is one other thing I do personally like to do. You do not have to do this, but I personally like to highlight all my data, and I like to come over here to center, and I like my data to be nice and centered. I am not worried if your data is not centered, but I think it looks really nice for them to be centered. And while we're at it, I'm going to make sure all my stuff here is centered. So why don't I just highlight the entire box, make sure it's all centered. If you're doing anything where things are a little high and low, like if I was to do this, for example, I'm not going to have you do this, but if you wanted these to be centered in there, well, you simply do this by highlighting across, and you go here, and it will center your item that way. We're not going to do that, but if you were going to have that need in the future, that's how you center top into this horizontally and vertically, I should say. So now that we have that, there is another thing we should do, and that is we're going to try to get this on your lab paper you're going to turn in, but these are really spaced apart. We need to shrink them a little bit, so let's go ahead and do this. I am going to try to see if we can shrink this B box here, and let's see how much we can get that. Maybe get that down to, looks like 5 pixels, or I'm sorry, 40 pixels is sufficient. So let's go ahead and see if we can do this. I'm going to highlight my T1 through T11, my trials, and I'm going to then go up here to Format and see if I can change the column width to 40 pixels. Whoops. I think it was meaning column width as far as the other, not the pixels, but the width itself, 5. My mistake. Okay, that is going to make this a lot more compressed and much easier when you and I try to get anything in our labs. By the way, if you're ever trying to change something here like this, you're ever trying to change, like, say, the mean and make that smaller too, and standard deviation, you want them to be equal in size, well, you can simply just highlight them like this and go up here to Format, and you hit, should say, Auto Fit Column Width. And what it does is it tries to make them fit as best as they can. So that's up to you guys to do. I'm just going to leave this here, and if I need to fit it later, I'll come back and take a look at it. But let's take a look at our final product. We've got our independent variable right there, and we've got our entire dependent variable right there for the whole potato. Same thing, we've got our independent variable here and our dependent variable here, just like this, okay? And with that said, the last thing we need to take a look at is what exactly the dependent variable is. It is rate of reaction. We should probably go in there and add this in there too. I'll just add it kind of like there, rate of reaction. That way it makes more sense that we are measuring the rate of the reaction as an adjusted volume. Okay, so we're completely done with our tables. Now we need to make the graph, and the graph is going to take a little less time. But in order to make the graph, you need to learn a little trick. You can come up here to View, and you can use this Zoom option here to change how big you want your data to be, if you want it really tiny, or in the case of Zoom, I can make this 50% the size of the screen. I can even blow it up really, really big if I wanted to, maybe to 200%. So it's completely up to you, but I want to show you a trick. Click on a square, preferably in the top left corner. Hold Control, and then use a wheel on a mouse, or you can use scroll on your touchpad on a laptop. And you can make this any size you want to. What I would like you to do is this. Make this small enough so that you can still see your graph, or I'm sorry, your table, but leave enough room to work on a graph. That's personally what I do, is make this small enough that I can see the table, but big enough room to work on a graph. What you're going to do now is, let's go ahead and make a graph. Go over here to your Insert. Go over here to Scatter Plots. We're going to click, and let's go ahead and here and add a line scatter plot. Here's the problem. Microsoft Excel automatically tries to think of what graph you want, and it's confused, and it's going to try to make a graph that looks like what it thinks it should, and in this case it's not going to work. So don't do anything as far as thinking this is the final product. What I would do for you is, let's get rid of all this, go up or click on the graph, then come up here to Select Data, which is under Design. Click on Select the Data, and then hit Remove. We want to start with a blank graph, and sometimes it'll just automatically make that when you click Insert, but it didn't in this case. So again, we're at Select Data. We're going to now add a series. Our series here is whole potato, and our series X value is going to be our X-axis. Let's click on this little box here and go 0 to 240 seconds. And our Y value, where this tricks a lot of people, if you think of our trials, these aren't really our final data points. It's actually the mean. Click on the mean and highlight that. That is our X and Y axis, and you can see it worked. But we're going to add one more because we have the diced potato. Let's go ahead and add another key here. Let's say diced potato. Click on your X-axis. We're going to again highlight time, and then we're going to go down here to Y and highlight our mean for this. And there you go. And honestly, this looks like a beautiful curve. And now that we have our graph, we need to start tweaking it a little to our advantage. First thing you want to do, me personally, I like to get rid of these grid lines. On some versions of Excel, the options will be up here, but in most cases, it's this little plus sign to the side. Click on it, and you'll notice it gives you a bunch of options here. I personally click on grid lines. I get rid of them because I don't like the grid lines. Next thing we want to do is we want to move this legend. If you don't have the legend, make sure you click it right there. I like it to the side, and I like it inside the graph because we want to use as much space as possible. Click on the inner graph here and drag it out like this. Try to get it to fill the screen as best as possible, and drag that key somewhere off to the side, but preferably in a place that's easy to see. Now what I'd like you to do is we're going to format the axis a little bit. Let's double click on the X-axis here, and when we double click on it, this pops up. The other thing you can do is click on an axis and right click over it and go to Format Axis. That's another option. What we're going to do is this. Our graph, if you notice, goes from 0, and the highest, goes from 0, but the highest value it goes is a little less than, is 240 seconds, which is less than 250. We don't need it to go to 300 seconds. That's kind of a waste. So I'm going to click on this again, Format Access, and I'm going to click here, maximum of 250 seconds. And I want it to count by 50, and in this case it looks like it's counting really good. If you wanted it to count by, say, 25, you could do that. Go to major unit of 25, and it'll count by 25. So completely up to you, but I'm just going to do major unit of 50. And our x-axis is done. Now we got to look at our y-axis. It looks like it's reasonable. It starts at 0, ends at 70. It's just about touching the top of that data point, so I'm probably good with this, but why does it have a decimal place? We don't need that. Let's go ahead and click it and right-click over it and get Format Access. I want to leave everything the way it is here, but I want to come down here and I want to get rid of that decimal place. Come down here to tick marks, and actually I think it's in numbers. Click down here at numbers, and if you look, it'll say decimal places under numbers. Change that to 0. And as you can see, we got rid of it. This is now a whole number right there, and that makes it a lot easier to work with. Okay, now that we're done with that, we have a really nice looking curve set up just like this. We now need to click back on the graph, and we need to add a title, just like that. And we're losing a little space, so let's go ahead and, let's click the inner graph and drag the inner graph in just a little bit. Inner graph, drag it up a little bit. And the reason we want to do this is so we can click on our title and give our title some more room down there. So we don't want our title to be too small, but it's up to you. Hopefully this is big enough for you all to see. All right, your title should be exactly what's over here. In this case, it's going to be time in seconds. And for our dependent variable, it's going to be rate of reaction adjusted volume. And we want a unit there in milliliters. Clearly, this is not going to be big enough, so let's go ahead and I'm going to Control A and highlight all of that, and then I can shrink it here to fit. And there should be a way for me to expand this, but I'm not sure what's going on here. Should be a way to expand that, but usually I don't make a title that long. But that should fit in there at that size. If you can figure that out, let me know. All right, so again, double check. Every graph should have a labeled x-axis with a unit and a y-axis with a unit. They should correspond to your x and y-axis on your table as well. But there's one final thing we need to do, and then you guys are done. You guys here, you need to create error bars. You see, these numbers are all over the place. Standard deviation tells us that. Come over here, click on the plus, and we need to go to error bars. Do not click on this or you're going to get something wacky kind of like that. So unclick that. You need to come back over here to this little guy and go to more options. And for this, we want to do it for both the whole and dice. So let's go to whole potato first. And we're going to go down here to custom, specify value. What we want to do is tell the computer we want an error bar, positive value of our standard deviation, and a negative value of our standard deviation. Let's go ahead and click on positive value. And let's go down here and click on negative value. Go ahead and hit OK. And that was for the whole potato. Now for our diced potato, we got to do the exact same thing. Let's go back here to error bars, more option. And give me 1 second here. There we go. I think I had to click on that orange line to get this error bar option to come up. I'm going to go diced potato this time. Let's go down here to custom. And let's add positive and negative. But this time, for our diced potato, we want to use the standard deviation down here. Tell it the positive and negative value. If you don't and you just add positive value, it's going to do this. We want to add the negative value as well. Let's go ahead and add positive and negative, just highlighting the standard deviation. And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, you are pretty much done with your graph. And by the way, if you want to ever change these, you can click on them too and erase those. I mean, everything is erasable and you can do all that with it. I should bring one last thing. What happens if your graph does this? Well, this is the one thing about Excel I don't like. It tends to redo things after you tried to set them. So, and the thing is, Excel tried to automatically calculate a negative axis. To fix this, I just have to click on it and right-click. And then I go back to Format Axis and tell it to go back to 0 again. And the reason why is it was set on automatic until I fixed it. I don't know why Excel is like that, but it's just something you have to get used to. Now that we are all set, our graph is all beautifully set, we need to post this in our assignment. So go down here to Google Chrome it's late. I'm on my computer. Go on your Google Classroom and go under here to Classwork. You'll notice here I've got your assignment already posted. And if you click on it, you'll see I have the document itself. I have the data, which you should be on, and the video file. Click here on the lab file itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste this in here like this. Open your Excel file. And what we want to do is we want to copy these and paste it. So I'll highlight like this and hit Control C for copy. Come back and you can paste it like this. Right click. And then you notice it pasted it like this. That's not good. Why is that the case? The answer is this is Google Chrome, ladies and gentlemen. Why Google is not very good to work with. We can't use it for that. There's two other options we can do with this because Google does not like to work. One option is you simply just use Microsoft Word and you can email the file, but you certainly do not have to do that. If you do that, you can paste it as a picture and it'll paste it fine, but you do not have to do that. The other option of how you can get this off here is you can snip this out of there as a picture. And what I like to do is this. Go to Windows and click in Snipping Tool. Get the Snipping Tool. It's built into Windows 10. Come up here to New, and then you can do it this way manually. And again, this is only for Google Chrome or Google Doc files. This does not have this problem if you were to do this on Microsoft Word and say write your lab research paper or something. All right, so now that I have snipped that, we're going to right-click it and copy it. And let's go back to Google now. Now we can paste it because we're pasting it as an image. And there you go. It's basically just a picture in here. You can even scale it if you want to, kind of like this. Oh, we'll just kind of leave it put. Let's go ahead and paste the graph in there now, and let's do the exact same thing. Get the graph where you want it. Get your snipping tool. Get it new. And let's just be careful on how we snip it. And there we go. Go back to Google and let's paste it. There you go. So we want to shrink this and make it look somewhat nice, not take up too much paper. If you want these centered, you can come up here to center the image, just like that. Other than that, there is your paper, and that is how you do it, ladies and gentlemen. There is going to be a few questions on here for you to answer, but otherwise, you've made a table. You have made your first graph on a computer. Don't forget to come up here and click Turn In. On your computer, it should say that. On mine, it says Share, so you have to take that into account. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's your assignment, making a table and making a graph and answering the questions on Google Classroom. Please let me know if you have questions. I hope this has been some help. The future videos will be faster simply because you will have learned a few things at that point. All right, have yourself a good weekend. I hopefully will see you next time I see you.